We're bringing up our next keynote speaker here, Danny Shapiro. And Danny and I first met many years ago when I was doing a podcast for Motor Trend. I was suggested I maybe meet this guy who was sitting by an Audi, as a matter of fact, and maybe would be involved and work for a company called NVIDIA that, I really wasn't that interested in at the time because I'm not a gamer per se, and what else could they possibly be involved in? Danny, in former background, again, I can't say enough about you. You've been the voice and such a stable communicator for NVIDIA, Bachelor of Science from Princeton, my gosh, and including an MBA from UC Berkeley. You've been on the advisory board, LA Auto Show, Connected Car Council, NVIDIA Foundation. Hey, Danny, thanks for joining us here today.
Hey, Charlie, it's really great to be here. Thanks.
See you sporting the company logo there. That's always nice. I mentioned in my opening remarks at NVIDIA, you had been an important, partner in this event as we started it off many years ago. But the other thing I mentioned also is that, again, this isn't necessarily a brand-centric conversation. And you guys have been, can I use the word ubiquitous?
Yeah, I think we provide a lot of tools, resources, a platform that's open for the industry to develop on. And so we work with so many different types of companies on ADAS solutions, on a variety of self-driving to robo-taxis and trucking. And so we really focus on helping to educate, we're part of PAVE, but also enable the industry to move forward to create safer roads.
Yes. Well, we've had a pretty busy day. I can't believe we're already at the final closing part. And again, a conversation with you is certainly welcome by me as we've covered so many different things. I mentioned when we first met, and we're certainly not going to dwell in the past, but I might have gotten very excited when I met you and said, "Oh golly, by 2020, we're all going to be owning our own autonomous vehicles." And certainly we've seen a lot of things rolled out there from a lot of the different entities today. Can you just comment on the trajectory we've had in the last 5 or 6 years?
Well, sure. I think we all had certain goals and expectations of what 2020 would be. And we're essentially creating something that's never been created before. We're undertaking perhaps one of the greatest AI challenges that's out there. And it's more complicated than everyone expected. And of course, we're focused on safety here, right? That's the topic of this summit. But again, it's critical that we get this right. And so it has taken longer. And what we've seen is that it's a massive amount of computation, right? There's so many algorithms, there's so many things we need to worry about to make sure we're developing a safe vehicle. And it just requires more computation, more hardware, more software. We're making great progress as an industry. There's obviously a lot of pilot projects out there. There's various things in production, but yeah, we're not at full self-driving yet, but we will get there.
Well, and again, without focusing too much in the past, the conversation might have been that was the only end game. There wasn't an in between, or there weren't even steps along the way. Perhaps it was just going to roll out fully functional. And I think that's one of the other things we've learned is that we can have progress, we can create safety with ADAS and other things. And again, you guys have had some great learnings in terms of your own role in all of this, from going, as a key sensor fusion tool to even some of the AI and then rolling out some of the simulation stuff. I'd love you to comment on that also.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of times there's this focus on what goes on inside the car itself, and that's really one piece of it. And before we even get to that, there's a massive amount of development work that goes on in the data center, collecting data, curating that data, labeling it, training neural networks, really developing those neural networks. And it's a continuous improvement, continuous development cycle. Really will never be done with the software. It'll just get better and better and better. So the concept of having a software-defined car is critical here. Just like your phone gets updates to the car. Well, we've talked about that in the past. But again, along that pipeline, before we even put the software in the car, we want to be able to test and validate it. And so we're using simulation very heavily now. And so that gives us the ability to change the time of day, the weather conditions, the traffic scenarios, do this repeatedly, and be able to essentially test all the scenarios that we possibly could much more effectively than could be done in on-road tests.
Well, and again, an interesting role that you've taken from, a hardware provider, GPU, to actually developing some of the intelligence around the actual driving and the driving experience, as it's proven to be much more complex. So what I'd love to focus on briefly, and again, not too deep, but bringing it forward, the last time we got a chance to get together would have been in, February, March. We've been in a COVID lockdown here in the West Coast, but development is still happening behind the scenes. You guys have this beautiful headquarter building that I imagine isn't very busy right now. Well, let's talk about just, the transition over the last couple months and what it all means for development.
Well, in reality, so much of the engineering work is done sitting in front of a computer. And so our engineering team, for the most part, is able to continue working from home. And that's been very effective. We're doing some testing, and usually we would have 2 people in a vehicle for safety reasons. And so now what we're able to do is use some of our remote technology to have one driver, safety driver inside the vehicle, and all the sensor data, all the systems are able to be monitored remotely by the co-pilot working from home, and they're able to be in constant communication. So again, remote technologies apply whether working from home or doing AV testing. Simulation, of course, is huge. So we're able to run thousands and thousands of jobs a day doing simulations in different parts of the Bay Area, in different parts of the US, and different parts of the world. And again, simulation gives us the ability to instantly go to any location, create the time of day we want and the weather conditions we want, and repeatedly test the algorithms. So again, we're doing full hardware in the loop testing and validation through simulation. So the actual hardware and software that ultimately will go into a car is being tested very safely in the cloud. So we're, again, advancing rapidly. We just had our GTC conference wrap up last week. Over 1,000 sessions in that conference. It's a whole entire virtual conference. I think it was probably 600 sessions live with Q&A and another 400 on demand. And so we've transitioned as a company very quickly into this virtual environment, and we'll continue to do so as long as we need to be safe.
Well, and again, the GTC, I know for a lot of people, that was their second favorite conference after the Silicon Valley Reinvents the Wheel event. But no, obviously sure. A very large event. And I think you benefited a little bit in some of the virtual such as having a worldwide audience as opposed to everyone coming out to San Jose, but certainly missed the opportunity because so much of the additional conversation happens in person. But you guys did pull that off, just as, again, with the help of Velodyne, that we're able to do this today and have the conversation with you. What about the future? Will it be different, do you think? I mean, will NVIDIA come out of this as an at-home more company or something different than what we saw go into it?
Yeah, I think the world obviously is still reacting and figuring all this out, and how soon will it get back to quote unquote normal. We are working from home for the foreseeable future, and it's just a function of the safety of employees for the most part. Probably it'll go on through the summer. I'm guessing a lot of tech companies have already announced they're going to be working from home till the summer, and we'll probably be in that same boat. And then, our CEO, Jensen, has again put employees first and said, you're not required to be back in the office until you feel comfortable doing so. So our policy, again, is safety. All the guidelines are going to be in place, and then the comfort and the needs of the employees. So he jokes that eventually people will want to come back to the office because they'll be tired of being at home. So you'll work from the office instead of working from home. Yeah. But we'll see. We have a very flexible work environment, and we're able to be very effective remotely. There are some engineers who go on site. There is work that goes on in the lab, and those essential workers, of course, go through all the regular protocols to remain safe.
Okay, since you mentioned Jensen, I have to ask you, do we know why he has that many spatulas, or is that some kind of a Wi-Fi setup that he's got behind him in the kitchen there? All
No,
right.
it's
Inside joke for anyone that saw his keynote. Go ahead and look it up and you can see. Hey, let's talk about that. Seriously, NVIDIA, a great announcement, several weeks ago, the Mercedes. Let's talk a little bit about what that means to you, to the vehicle, and again, autonomous vehicle development.
I think what we announced was Mercedes will be creating an entirely new vehicle architecture with NVIDIA. And so a centralized AI supercomputer that will go in every single vehicle. So it's not just the premium level from the base models, the entry level, the A class, all the way through the S class and beyond. So it's a standard single platform, which is great because they then can invest in that engineering effort and not have a whole bunch of different things that they're trying to do simultaneously. In addition, this is going to be software defined, meaning over-the-air updates will be part of the vehicle. So what you buy and when you're driving 6 months, a year down the road can be different. You'll continue to get upgrades, new features, new capabilities added to that vehicle. And so a variety of AI processing for sensor data outside the vehicle as well as inside the vehicle will really revolutionize the experience. So it's an entire new engineering effort, a new vehicle architecture, and a new business model for Mercedes as well.
Wow. Along the lines of rolling out right now, and again, with your, I'm just under the guise of NVIDIA's ubiquitous nature. A couple of the announcements recently, Waymo, of course, taking the safety driver out of the vehicle in the Phoenix market. Can you comment on that?
Mm-hmm. I think it's great. So it's a natural progression. You have several companies that have applied for and been granted the rights to do that here in California. And I think it's great. I think once the technology has been tested, validated, proven safe, that's the next logical step.
Yeah. And then, of course, we had our speaker recently, earlier this morning, Oliver with Voyage, talking about not dissimilar in that he's rolling out the robo-taxi, is called it, in and around the villages, of course, the retirement communities, so which gives them a little bit of a controlled environment, kind of, I guess. So if we're asked when do autonomous vehicles hit the road, is the answer already?
Yeah. Again, I think we've always talked about these different rollouts. So geo-fenced areas, things we're doing in the industrial sector, commercial sector with trucks, to shuttles on campuses, to confined spaces, whether it's just San Francisco, it's just Phoenix or someplace else, or a retirement community. So that again is the logical flow to bring the technology out and do it in a constrained, a less risky environment, and we'll continue to increase those geofences over time.
Yeah, and again, almost I enjoyed the conversation with Torque talking about and autonomous stuff, just doing some of the things, again, outside of transportation. The conversation, just curious, how much, if you follow when J.D. Power is talking about consumer acceptance, I know you're a supplier to the manufacturer, but you also have a consumer-facing part of your business. So how does that all tie together?
Absolutely. Consumer acceptance is really important. And I know a lot of the studies show there's quite a bit of resistance, there's uncertainty. And I believe, as well as I think a lot of other people do, is once you actually see it or experience it, it's very different from reading about it or hearing in the media, which generally talks about if there is an accident with a particular kind of vehicle or a scenario, it's often blown out of proportion. It usually doesn't have the headline doesn't really match the body of the article, and it's sensationalized. And so I think that creates some fear. And so as things roll out, as people get to experience it, their perceptions, I believe, will change dramatically. Again, that's part of PAVE, is how do we bring out the technology, prove to people that it's safe, let them know it's okay to be on their streets or for them to be joining in some of these programs and trials.
Yeah, and then just finally circling back to the focus for this particular conversation this year, and again, we appreciate your participation through all the years, but safety, is the key word. We peeled off, ACEs and other aspects, and you guys are all part of that, but just focused on safety. Let's get some comments from NVIDIA on how that is so important and what you guys are specifically working on in that channel.
Absolutely. I mean, this is our number one priority, and it permeates everything we do. And so if you look at the chip design, there's safety procedures that go through the whole layout and design of the chip, building in redundancy and diversity of different processor types inside the chips, bringing in different redundant algorithms and diverse algorithms. So the development side goes through processes, the chips, the software, everything back in the data center. Cybersecurity, of course, is a big aspect. And it's, again, we're not just developing something specifically going to a car, but we're developing AI technologies being used in healthcare and in banking. And so many industries are depending upon NVIDIA today. So our technology has to be secure. It has to be safe in these other environments. And of course, mission critical applications and life critical applications of autonomous vehicle mean from the data center to the vehicle, that safety is built in. So there's so many technologies, so many engineers, so many men and women engineering years invested in just the safety, the certification, and then the validation testing through simulation. So there's really a huge effort at NVIDIA, and it still is developing. We rolled out our safety force field, which again is a set of principles that are built into the vehicle that will ensure through mathematical proofs, we've been able to do this, that our vehicle will not create or contribute to an hazardous situation. So essentially, we're developing the technology to sense everything around us and be able to avoid anything. We can't prevent somebody from running into us, of course, but we can do everything possible to make sure that we don't contribute to or create an unsafe situation.
You know, finally, just circling back to the title of this conversation, which I just focused on Fireside, and it's great to talk to you, Danny. And I'm going to go ahead and put my own mantle on just because you're wearing yours. So
nice.
Cover my COVID here. But creating the perpetually upgradable autonomous car, you know, I can't not think of a word I learned from you, machine learning, which again is the precursor to AI. So let's close out on a quick comment about that.
Essentially, the software for an autonomous vehicle will never be done, right? As humans, we're always learning, we're growing, right? People who attended this conference today learned something new. And so these vehicles will continue to get smarter and smarter over time. The value of that vehicle will increase. Consumers will be able to get new software updates that will enable new features, new capabilities, new driving modes. And that joy of something new continues throughout the life of ownership of that vehicle. Or even when you sell it, you might actually get more money than you paid for that car because it can do more. And then the next owner will be able to get additional updates, upgrades, and the car will just get better and better. So we see then potentially the life of the car gets longer. You put a powerful supercomputer inside, it has all the sensors and software updates. This perpetually upgradable machine gets better and better and safer.
Oh my gosh, you just got me very excited, Danny. I mean, technology in vehicles always seems to age quicker than the vehicle itself. So the concept that it might even be better, and then I'm thinking of my next phone is going to be better by just owning it, or my next computer. Awesome. You heard it first here from Danny Shapiro. But hey, Danny, thanks for taking time just to have the chat with us and kind of circle back on a bunch of things that we talked about, and appreciate your your statesman status in our industry, and look forward to seeing you in person as soon as it all makes sense.
That'd be great. Thank you again.
Thank you.